Hey everybody, welcome back to Tech Talk Education. Thanks for joining me. This is Dr. Heldman. In today's video, what I want to do is talk to you a little bit more about Kali Linux and the tools inside Kali. And we're going to explore a topic called open source intelligence, OSINT, and the tools that we can use for that. So it should be super informative, especially if you're looking to get into working in cybersecurity. Let's get started. Before we go too much further down the road, we're going to talk about open source intelligence. It's called OSINT, and using Kali Linux and some of the tools that we have available to us through Kali. I want you to understand that getting onto a cybersecurity job, a cybersecurity position, is going to take a little bit of work on your part. The number of cybersecurity certifications out there are just absolutely, there's a million of them. There are lots of different companies involved with this. And so you're going to have to be on a path where you're desiring to attain and earn these certifications. Then you apply for and you get onto a security operations center job. You're going to be called a SOC analyst. And these people are responsible for looking at the logs of various systems, checking alerts that are coming in from systems, looking at the wire, the network, lots of different things. So there's this avenue of information that's coming your way, and you have to make decisions about, what's happening. Is there something happening us to it that we should be paying attention to? So this is like the bottom of the pyramid. That's where you hire on as, and this is a 3 to 5 year thing here. So what you've got to do, you're getting on to the cybersecurity department, you're a SOC analyst, you're meeting the people that you're working with, you're doing good things, working hard, you're there every day. And then ultimately you get enough certifications, enough skills, you have a feel for what it is that you're looking at, you might be promoted to the red team. So the red team is the offensive team, blue team is defensive, and the concept is that we want to get into a network without people being able to detect us, and the purpose of that is to alert the stakeholders that we've gotten into the network, and here's how we did it. We found these vulnerabilities. So pen testing is a cool job. I've had a lot of students over the years that came in and they wanted to be a pen tester right away. I don't think that that's something that you should have on your radar, except several years out, unless you've been working on cybersecurity all along. So the idea is that it's like anything, like coding, or being a chef, something like that. It takes time to go up the ladder, and so you've got to be prepared to do that. And so what you're doing is you're studying for all these different certifications, you're getting more information, you're being the best kind of player you can be on the team, you're being very supportive of the team. And you might wind up being promoted to red team, which is pen testing, and there are people that are very good at that. Then there's a category of a person, I would say is slightly above that, and that is somebody who's a threat hunter. And they have much more advanced technological skills and capabilities. For example, they can look out and through detective work, it's basically just really good detective work, they can find out that there's a zero-day exploit that's being launched on them by some threat source. Or they can undo software and take a look at it and see how it's working. That's called reverse engineering. Or they can get in there and look at the assembly code and the C++ code, and they can find out what's happening. This was how Stuxnet was discovered as to what it was doing. And then finally, at the very top, there are, of course, myriad people in here that are supporting the organization. And then at the very top is the chief security officer. They call it the CISO, or the Chief Information Security Officer. I forgot to put the R on the end of office, but I meant officer. And this person is at the very top. So I just don't want you to get any wild imaginations. You're a younger person and you want to go out and you want to immediately start pen testing. It's probably not going to happen. It's a pretty sophisticated endeavor. It's something that you want to strive for. It's like getting really, really, really good at a video game. You're watching Twitch and watching people play this and picking up tips and tricks here and there. That's kind of the way it's going to be. And then all along, you're picking up these advanced certifications and you're proving to everybody that you know what it is you're talking about. And you're watching Dr. Hellman's videos so you can learn how to drive this software. So speaking of software now, let's go in and let's take a look at some OSINT tools. And today we're going to continue going down the road with our ethical hacking laboratory that consists of pfSense router. We're going to use Metasploitable 2, and we are going to use Kali Linux. So let's get started. Now, in previous videos, we have learned about nmap. There's a lot more to know about nmap, so we're not quite done, I don't think. We'll come back to that, but I'm talking about open source intelligence. The phrase we use for that is called OSINT. And the concept is this. We've been tasked with some sort of a penetration testing endeavor. And we're being paid by a company to try to get into this company to see what we can do. And the idea is that we want to uncover vulnerabilities and any way that we might exploit the system, things like that. So OSINT is where we start. We start by doing what's called reconnaissance. You can actually go a little bit lower than that and just go out on the corporate website and things like that, on LinkedIn, and look at corporate stakeholders, who are they, what are their interests, etc. And you're hoping to glean information. The information you're looking to glean would be email addresses, telephone numbers, URLs, things like that. And specifically, we're after the names of servers and their IP addresses. So we're interested in getting into the network somehow. We want to know the devices that are on the network, whether that's endpoint devices like routers and switches or servers or what have you. So OSINT's a terrific thing, and we can use nmap to do a lot of this. Now I have Metasploitable running here, and so we're going to do a lot of our work on Metasploitable. But the first thing I wanted to show you is that there is a command called whois. And so I'm going to bring up Firefox here and start a new session. And what we want to do is we want to use Firefox to do a little bit of OSINT. And there is a TCP/IP command called whois. And you can go and look at it. Whois looks up domains. So the concept here is like you've got google.com. Google is a domain name. And what that means then is that we can get to it by referencing its name. It's much easier for us to do than if we were using, say, an IP address. So what whois does is it goes and it looks at the name of somebody and looks up the record for that somebody. So whoever created that domain name, they went and registered that domain name with a registration society, and now they own it. There is a record that's created called the whois record, and it denotes the information about that person. So we can go out here and look at the whois domain lookup, for example. This is just GoDaddy. There's a whole bunch of people that do that. And if I wanted to look up, say, williamheldman.com, I'm picking on my own self. And you are not committing any crimes by doing a whois. There's no big deal. All it's going to do is bring back information about who the owner of the domain is. And so in this case, this is my domain, williamheldman.com. This is my ID, and you can tell the dates when I was authorized to when I took it over. I started it. There is an organization called ICANN. Let's go out and look at those guys real quick so you know about them. ICANN is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. These are the guys that manage the domain names, but that doesn't mean that you have to go directly to ICANN to get a domain name. You can get a domain name from AWS or from GoDaddy or whatever, but the idea here is that ICANN has done some work and has granted me this domain name. So that's what's happening here. And it's saying client transfer is prohibited. It sounds to me like at some point somebody went out and tried to transfer some data from a website somewhere, and ICANN's like, look, we're going to stop that. So the idea here, the takeaway for you is that there have been a lot of security protocols that have been put in place to keep you from doing that, to keep you from, stealing somebody's stuff. I'm not saying you, I mean colloquially, keep people from doing that. And ICANN has been responsible for this. So they've got client delete prohibited. So you could, if you got, into the registration for this domain, you couldn't delete it, or you can't transfer it to yourself, and you can't update it. So that's the idea there. Now, NS stands for name server, and so this is name server AWS DNS. I host my website on AWS. It's very cost effective, and you can see that there are 4 DNS servers that are serving up my website to you. Depending upon where you're at in the world, you'll hit one of these web servers, and then you can see that all the other information is grayed out. I'm registered through Amazon. I can contact Amazon for information. That's sort of an idea. And now here's another thing, IANA. Let's go look and see who IANA is. Whenever I see this stuff, I go and look it up just to make sure I understand who the authority is. These guys are responsible for giving out IP address numbers, is what they do. Been around a long time, well known. You should know about IANA. I can look at the domain names here, and I can go look at IP addresses and things like that. You can't really go buy an IP address today. You are essentially leasing one from your ISP. The ISPs and the big, the governments, universities, things like that, they're the ones that are the largest technological companies. They are the owners of the IP address blocks today. So essentially what you're doing is you're leasing an IP address to get you out onto the web. So that's the information there, and then here's a contact phone number for abuse. Well, that is called the whois record. So we can actually do this inside here. We could natively do whois. It will run just fine from here. Or I think we can try that. So I'll give that a try. I just type that in to make sure it's going to work. Whois williamheldman.com. This is a command that's known to Windows and to Linux. And it goes out and gets the whois information just fine. And you can see the same thing that we saw when we run GoDaddy. And you get some phone numbers and things like that. You get a little bit more information, but what you don't get is information about me. Now, I'll tell you an anecdotal story. I purchased some hacking hardware from a company, and I got it, and I was shorted an item. I couldn't figure out on the website how to complain about it, so I looked up the whois record, contacted the owner of the domain, got him on the phone, and he sent me the spare part. So that was pretty cool. I really liked that. So that's whois. Now, let's start talking about Metasploit, because Metasploit is going to be a very rich source of us being able to do passive reconnaissance, which is where we're just finding out information about a host, or we can do active reconnaissance where we're actually going and dropping off an exploit, or we're doing something else that's going to get more information about our host, and that's the idea. So let's launch Metasploit. Now, I'm going to always use sudo to launch Metasploit, and I'm going to type in Metasploit Framework Console, MSF Console, and hit enter. I'll type in my password. Now, Metasploit is a framework. What it is it's a place to hold a lot of things. So it has exploits, and it has auxiliaries. It has all kinds of great stuff that you can use to go about your task of doing reconnaissance and even dropping off, an exploit or two. And so when Metasploit starts, there's a couple of things I want you to observe here. The cow is a very common banner. You're always going to get a banner from Metasploit, and the cow is the super popular one. You can tell that this is Metasploit version 6. There are 2,437 exploits that I have available to me with this version of Metasploit. This is the community edition of Metasploit. There is a pro version that you can buy. If I'm being honest with you, I'm not crazy about it because it's a web-based version, so everything is drag and drop. And I think that it makes it a little more friendly But I'm liking using the command line Metasploit, if I'm being honest with you. There are some things called auxiliaries. These are exploits, and an exploit is designed to do something to a computer, whether it's to provide you a reverse shell or allow you to drop off a payload or whatever. An auxiliary is something that allows you to add on to what you're already doing. So you've done something with the computer, now you back out of that, you launch an auxiliary, and it's going to go do something. There are post-exploitation modules. There's 429 of them. I'm all done with the exploitation. Now I want to go, for example, maybe clean up the logs or something like that. There are payloads. What is a payload? Well, it's something you want it to do. It could be anything, like it range from taking over a user's webcam and their mic, which would scare the dickens out of somebody, to just being fairly innocuous and not really creating any trouble, just observing. And then there are things called encoders. There are what are called no-ops. And then there's some evasion techniques. And if you pay for the pro version, you're going to get a lot more than this. But I find that this version of Metasploitable is pretty good. Now, let's talk about this banner real quick. To change the banner, you just type in banner, and you'll get a new banner. There's a million of them, so you can just change the banner to your heart's content, whatever you like to see. And this is the Metasploit prompt. So MSF6, greater than sign, and your cursor is flashing right there. This is called a prompt. Now, Metasploit supports all of the Linux commands. So you can easily type in a lot of the Linux commands here right in Metasploit. For example, to clear the screen is just the word clear, and it works just fine. Okay, now let's try the same thing from Metasploit. So let's say, for example, we're online and we're going to go do some passive reconnaissance, and the first thing we want to start doing is we want to look and see who is William Heldman. So I'm going to say, who is WilliamHeldman.com. Now the thing I want you to pay attention to is that you are doing it through Metasploit now, and I hit enter. And it goes and gets exactly the same information as it got before. It found AWS, it queried for the registration information, and gives that to me, and we're not anywhere at all close to being put into jail for this or having... I used to kid my students that, a black Cadillac would show up in front of your door, and two guys named Guido and Luigi would get out, and they have baseball bats, and they're going to break your knees because you tried to get into their website. So that's not going to happen, and this is legal. You can run whois on anyone. For example, let's clear the screen, and let's just try whoismicrosoft.com, for example, just for giggles and hoots, and you get the same idea. So you get this Mark Monitor thing. Somebody's handling this for Microsoft, and you get all the information. There's their name servers, Azure DNS, you see. And so that idea, we didn't touch Microsoft at all. We're not hurting them. We're just getting whois information from them. Why is that important? Well, you might get contact names, you might get phone numbers, you might get an email address that seems meaningful to you. I would tell you that today, when you register a domain, most people turn on secure domain tracking. And so the company through whom you requested the domain is going to turn that on for you, and you're not going to be able to get much information out of a whois record. Now, one of the things that I might be looking for is I might be looking for an IP address. And if I found one of the things that's very, very important to me is an IP address. So I want to be able to get into servers. I want to be able to get into routers, switches, IDSs, IPSs. I've got to be able to traverse the network to get into the internal network. And so anything that has an actual IP address for me is helpful. Or if I can get the name of a server, like here, name server tac1750.awsdns tac26.co.uk. That would be, and I would never try to get into AWS because those guys are very, very good at what they do and they're very hardened down. But the idea here is I know a machine name now, and so what I can do is I can take and copy this. So I highlight all of this out, right click and say copy selection. Then I go to the bottom, right down here, and I'm going to ping that selection. And so we can do all of that right from inside Metasploit. It's fine. It works just fine because it's a framework, guys. What it's designed to do is allow you to go from the freezer to the oven to the table doing your passive and your active recon. It's actually an amazing tool. And nmap can be invoked directly inside Metasploit. So let's see what we get here. Now I get juicy stuff. So you can see where I'm going here, Control C. Now I've got an IP address. And ICMP, the Internet Controlled Message Protocol, returned that address back to me. So let's make sure that you understand that ping is a utility. It's a command that you can use to go the IP address of a host name. So you know the host name. Now what you want to do is you want to get the IP address. My question to you now is, have you done anything malicious so far? You have not. You've pinged the host and you've gotten its IP address. And now what we can do is directly ping the IP address to see if it'll respond this way, like so, and it responds just fine. Now, the other part that I wanted to point out to you is that ping is a utility, but ICMP is a protocol. You have to promise me that you're going to become a master of TCP/IP, and there's actually two versions. There's IP version 4 and IP version 6, and this number that you're looking at here is a public class C IP version 4 address, and you've got to know your way around all of that, because at the end of the day, it is all about IP and IP protocols, and ICMP, Internet Control Message Protocol, is one of those protocols, and ping utilizes ICMP to get information back from a host. So that's why you're interested in that. Okay, so far we're doing passive recon. We found some DNS boxes, and now what we've done is we've pinged that DNS name, and now we have an address to go along with it. And this would be where we can bypass DNS. We don't need to use DNS at all. You know, DNS is like the phone book of the internet. It's you're looking up a name and getting a number. In this case, we looked up a name using ping. We got the number, and now we can go straight for the number and bypass DNS altogether. That's actually very, very cool. Now, there's another website you should know about, and it's called Netcraft. So you can type in the IP search dns.netcraft.com. DNS stands for Domain Name System. The idea is it's the phone book for the internet. You're looking up a name to get a number. And in this case, we can use this site to do the same thing. We can do a whois lookup. And so I can look for a host, williamhelbman.com, like that, and click search. This is passive recon. Oh, it didn't find my name out there. That's fine. This is passive recon. This is not active recon. So I just wanted you to know about this, searchdns.netcraft.com. So now that we know the IP address for DNS here for one of AWS's DNS servers, this is one that's in the UK. What you can do now is you can get rid of the ping here, and you can do a whois on that instead, and you can get more information, and you get different information, which is very cool. And so you're looking up through here. This number is kind of weird, 555 all 0. Is there an all 0 phone number? I don't know. But what's really cool about this, and of course with AWS you're not going to get what you really are looking for, but if it's mom and pop kettle, and we've got a website, you know, that is managed by somebody that's not, you know, as smart as somebody like an Amazon, where they've got all this buttoned up, and they're doing things kind of by the seat of their pants, they're just finding out, you could find out that there's a lot of really interesting information that you could get. For example, now I know that their DNS server is housed at 13,200 Woodland Park Road in Herndon, Virginia 20171, that would be pretty interesting to me because now I know something about where this data center is at. So that's the idea with that. Now there's another passive recon command you should know about. It's called dig. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab another terminal window here. I'm going to run this as sudo. And so what I want to do is I want to find out if there are different DNS records that are available to me. Now you'll need to study and understand. I probably should do a movie on DNS and DNS records because it's very, very important to you. There are what are called records. So the idea is when I create a domain name and then I have this server do special things, it might get a different DNS record. So everybody gets what is called an A record, which means that they are just a host. They're a host on the domain. There is what is called a quad A record. I had a kid that failed to pass the certification exam, and he did not know what a quad A record was. And I'm like, dude, that was mentioned in the study guide. Why didn't you find that out? Quad A is an IP version 6 address, so that's an IP version 6 host. Single A is just a regular host. And when I say host, we're talking about cameras, printers, computers, etc. Anything that has an IP address is a host. Well, there's a host record called MX, and it stands for mail exchanger. And the idea is that it's acting as an email server. And so those are really juicy because now you know if when you find an email server, you have a different approach that you can use to try to get into the network. The whole goal, red team goal, I'm not talking about black hat hackers. I don't want you to be a black hat hacker. Those guys are evil and wicked. What I want you to do is I want you to learn how to foist these guys, how to stop them in their tracks from doing this. And so that's why I'm teaching what I'm teaching here. So let's look for an MX record. Now there is a command. I'm going to invoke this as sudo, and the command is called dig. And if you wanted to know more about this command, you would type in man dig, and you'd get the man page for it. There it is. Or you could do dig tac help. Let's see if that works. Yeah, it was dig tac h. Clear dig tac h. The tac help is new. The tac h is old. They're getting away from the tac h and going to the tac help. Doesn't matter. That the idea is that you could get more information about dig that way. What we're going to do is a sudo dig. We're going to look for an MX record, and we're going to look for Microsoft.com. Again, I am not doing anything illegal here. All I am doing is saying, hey, can you tell me, go out to DNS, wherever it's at, wherever that server's at, go out to DNS and tell me if you can find an MX record. So in this case, it went out to Google servers, port 53, and it found a couple of MX records. There's one, and it's at microsoft.com.mail.protection.outlook.com. And that means that there is a web server somewhere in the world, or a mail server somewhere in the world with this name. So what we could do then is we could take and right-click and copy this name. And just like before, we can ping that name. And we're all about getting the IP address as opposed to the name. So I'm going to ping these guys, and there's my IP. So what I can do is I can ping. I've done this now. I found out the MX record here. I can grab the MX record here, and I can take and copy that selection, and then I can ping the selection. So if I clear the screen, I'm going to ping. I'm going to right-click and paste that selection and hit enter, and I get an IP address back. This happens to be a Class A public IP address, and I could now bypass DNS and start getting into that. And the way that I got that was I said sudo dig mx microsoft.com. And what that does is that returns a mail exchanger record out of DNS. Well, whose DNS? Well, in this case, it was Google's DNS that found that on port 53. So this is saying 8.8.8.8, that's Google. And then this hashtag 53 means that on port 53, we found this record, this MX record. That's correct, because DNS listens on port 53, and an MX record is a part of the overall DNS database. And then you can come up here and look at other information that I found. Got some cool information out of here. Well, that's dig. And so you can run the dig command to get more information. This, too, is passive recon. Now, the last thing that I want you to know about for now, we're still in the Metasploit framework here. I do want you to know that by default, Metasploit, it has a database, and the database is not turned on. So you have to turn it on. I want to show you how to do that, because what we can do then is we can run nmap queries right in Metasploit, and it gets posted to a database. So let me show you how we're going to do that. I'm going to go grab the other prompt here. I'm going to clear the screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for what is called the PostgreSQL. It's pronounced like G-R-A-Y, SQL. So what we're looking for is we're saying, do you have a daemon out there called PostgreSQL? And if you do have a daemon out there, a service, I want you to start that service, and the service is called PostgreSQL. Now, PostgreSQL is a very well-known open source database. Let's go look for that. You should know something about Postgre. You need to know about databases altogether. But you want to know about Postgre here because it's a very, very important database product. And it's right up there with MySQL. These are the two big open source database products. And so Postgre is one of the ones that you're interested in. So we're saying here that Kali Linux running Metasploit has Postgre, and we need to start that database. Now by default, it is not started. It is worth your while to start it. So I'm just going to run this. And let's see if it'll start that database for me. So that's great. It came back, nothing there. Just started the database now. Now what we want to do is we want to initialize this database so that we have it for Metasploit. So I'm going to say Metasploit Framework DB. Metasploit Framework database init. And what that means is initialize the Postgre database for work with Metasploit. Boom, like that. Oh, I've got to run it as root, so I'll type in sudo. Boom. Database appears to be configured. Now the reason it's doing that is because I've already done this step. You would see it go and initialize the database and getting it going, but in my case, I've already got it working here. Now let me show you a little bit of an exotic command that you can use to find out if Postgre actually is listening. So we type in netstat. We're going to do this weird command here. I'm going to do an antp pipe grep, and I'm going to ask it to show me. All right, now to find out if PostgreSQL is running, we're going to do a little bit of a test here. So the test is this. I'm going to run the netstat command, and I'll do sudo netstat like that. And then what we want to do is I'm going to do some switches here. I don't need to explain them right now. The switches are ANTP, and we're going to pipe this into the grep command, and we're looking for Postgres or Postgre. So these are switches that are put into the netstat command, and you can look at those up by looking at the man page or the help screen. We're taking the output, we're grepping the output. What we're saying here is we're saying look for just Postgres and show us the details about Postgres. So then we hit enter, type in the password, and it comes up and says that Postgres is running, which is great. That's a good thing. In fact, there are two of them. So there's Postgres TCP/IP version 4 listening on the loopback adapter on port 5432, and you can see here that it says that it's Postgre. And then there's an IP version 6 Postgre that's listening on ::1. This is a very, very abbreviated TCP/IP version 6 address that is again pointing to loopback adapter. This is saying loopback adapter here. Again on port 5432. So we're checking to see if Postgre is running and if it's listening. Now, you recall that I'm in the case files folder, and I've got this XML file out there that we want to import into Metasploit. And we're going to type in a special MSF console command called db_status connected to MSF, type PostgreSQL. Okay, great. Now we've already run this command to go ahead and get this XML file, so now what we want to do is we want to import it into the Postgre database. So I'm going to just grab the name of this file right here. I'll just right click and copy that. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to do a db_import into, and I'm just going to paste this in. Right click, paste, and hit enter. Beautiful. Now that's the way it normally should look. You might get a problem with connecting to the database, like it'll say up here that it is connected to PostgreSQL, but then when you try to run this import, it will not do the import. You'll have to chase that down. There's some good help on, for example, ChatGPT and other AI. I use an AI tool that's inside my Brave browser that seems to work really, really well. And you'll have to chase this down. There are a couple of commands you can do. You might have to even undo the connection, redo the connection, reinitialize the database. But this is what it should look like when you're importing this. And now, since the XML file is on board with us inside Metasploit, so the concept here is Metasploit's a framework. There's a bunch of tools that third parties can write and throw into it. And it also uses a database. It uses a production database called PostgreSQL. What we can do is we can say hosts taxi address. And what you're doing now is you're saying, okay, I've got this XML file that's imported, and I want to take a look at it and see the address. So if I had queried a bunch of different hosts using my nmap command, and I had all those addresses in there, what this would do is it would go ahead and list all the addresses that I found. And of course, the TCP IP address is the main thing. That's what we're really after here. Now the other thing that I wanted to show you was this is what XML looks like. And here's the thing. All I did was I entered a command to cat that XML file. And XML uses what are called tags. So it's just very much like HTML. You know, if you've written any HTML code, it's like that. It's using just what are called tags. And the tags start with a word like this. They have a left caret, a left angle bracket, right angle bracket, and then a word. Now in this case you see the slash here. So the slash is turning off an OS tag. So here's where we turn the OS tag on. Here's where we turn it off. So from the standpoint of it being like HTML, it is like HTML, except what you can do is you can think of as XML as HTML on steroids. In other words, what we can do is create whatever tags we want and use those inside our XML database. And so you could go through and read this, and that's what it's parsing when you do this command here. You're saying host taxi, look for just the address here. So I hope this was helpful to you, and please, if you're enjoying this channel, like it and subscribe to it and share it with your friends. You're welcome to drop off comments. I really enjoy the comments that I get on the site. And I just wish you a really good day, and we will talk to you in the next video.